Okay, so we've got a ton of articles and like expert opinions and all this buzz about this BRICS currency,
Yeah,
and we really want to like get a handle on what it all means.
it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it feels like a really big deal, like
Yeah.
way beyond just like, oh, there's a new kind of money out there, right? This feels like it could shift things globally.
It really could. I think what's so interesting is that it's not just about money.
Right.
It's about power too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about these BRICS nations. So we're talking Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they're basically trying to like rewrite the rules of the global financial system.
Yeah.
And that's a direct challenge to, how the US dollar has been running things for so long.
Okay, so that's a huge part of what we want to dig into in this deep dive, right? Like, what does it actually mean to challenge the dollar? You flagged some sources that were talking about backing this new currency with gold and oil,
Right.
and that just seems like such a big statement. Like,
Yeah.
going back to this almost like pre-digital approach to money.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a bold move.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it by like pegging their currency to actual physical stuff, commodities,
Yeah.
gold, oil. They're saying, look, this is stable.
Uh-huh.
This is real. You can trust this. They want to build trust in a system that's completely outside of, the traditional Western institutions.
Yeah, like the IMF
Yeah,
and the
right.
World Bank and all.
Classic.
Yeah.
So it's about saying, we don't need you. We can do this ourselves. It's a statement.
Yeah. Okay, so big statement for sure.
Huge statement.
But is it actually realistic? Like, some of these sources were throwing around this 2025 launch date,
Right.
but that feels so ambitious,
It's incredibly ambitious.
given all the moving parts, you know?
Yeah. And there's a ton of skepticism.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, do all 5 of these BRICS nations actually even want this?
Yeah.
Like, do they have the political will to make it happen?
Right, because we're talking about countries with such different interests
Well,
and
it's-
agendas.
Yeah, sometimes they're totally at odds with each other.
Right. And even if they all agree, like, their economies are so different, right?
Yeah. Can they really get their act together enough to make a shared currency actually work?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yep.
Like, how do you align monetary policies when
Nice.
you have, one country that's an energy powerhouse
Yeah,
and another that's, a manufacturing giant?
right. Yeah.
Like, it's possible.
And then beyond just making it work internally, like, will other countries even use it?
Exactly. That's the big thing.
If nobody's accepting these BRICS bucks, like,
Mhm.
what's the point?
Totally. I mean, you need buy-in
Yeah.
from the rest of the world.
Okay, so speaking of buy-in, I think it was that Wall Street Journal article you
Oh,
sent.
wait, yeah.
It mentioned that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have, like, expressed interest.
Yeah, that's huge.
So if big energy players like that are like, yeah, we're going to get in on this,
Yeah.
wouldn't that kind of create a domino effect?
Absolutely. It's like a signal, right?
Yeah. If these energy giants in Saudi Arabia, let's be real, they're the big player.
Yeah.
If they're like, okay, we're willing to use BRICS currency,
Yeah.
it changes everything. Other countries start to pay attention. Global trade patterns shift.
Yeah.
And suddenly that 2025 deadline starts to feel a little bit more real.
Okay, so even if they're not fully operational, like all the systems aren't in place, the fact that it's even being considered
Right.
is a big deal.
It's a huge shift in momentum. Like, the world is starting to take this seriously.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, they
Yeah.
pull it off, they launch this currency,
Okay.
it's working, what happens to the US dollar?
Right. That's the big question.
But right now, it's the king.
Totally. I mean, right now, over 80% of global trade happens in U.S. dollars.
Right.
It's the reserve currency.
Yeah.
But if this BRICS currency takes off
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually being used for international transactions,
Okay.
it's going to chip away at that.
So chipping away, does that mean like a slow decline, or are we talking like dollar crash?
I think it's important to remember that, the dollar didn't just become dominant by accident.
Right.
It's backed by the U.S. economy,
Yeah.
which is huge, and it's at least usually pretty stable.
Right.
But if demand for dollars decreases because, say, global trade starts using this alternative,
Uh-huh.
that weakens the dollar's position.
So like less demand means lower value, like a stock.
Exactly. It's basic supply and demand.
Okay, so if the dollar gets weaker, that means imports get more expensive for us, right?
Right, because our dollars just don't buy as much on the global market anymore.
So all that stuff we buy from overseas.
Yeah, everything.
Like my electronics, my clothes.
Your coffee bean.
Yeah, my Brazilian coffee, that all gets more expensive.
Yeah. And that affects, your daily life, your expenses.
Yeah.
It's not just some abstract thing.
Okay, and then there's that whole issue of U.S. debt. I read somewhere that this could affect treasury bonds.
Right.
Like, how does that work?
So a lot of countries, including some of the BRICS members,
Yeah.
they hold U.S. debt in the form of treasury bonds.
Right.
It's like an investment for them.
Uh-huh.
But if they start shifting their reserves into this new BRICS currency,
Okay.
they're going to want to sell those bonds.
Okay.
Less demand for those bonds means yields go up.
Okay.
And that means it's more expensive for the U.S. government to borrow money.
Oh, wow. So this isn't just about some far-off countries playing financial games.
Yep.
This could hit us right here at home.
Right in the wallet.
But, like, everything from the cost of a cup of coffee
Yeah.
to, like, our national debt.
It shows how interconnected it all is.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about predicting, like, an immediate collapse, but
Yeah.
more about, like, understanding that things are shifting.
Okay.
And the U.S. needs to be ready.
Okay, so we've talked about a weaker dollar.
Right.
But, like, what does that actually mean for a person like me?
What?
Are we
Wow.
talking inflation here? Like, my grocery bill's going up?
That's definitely a possibility, yeah.
Okay.
A weaker dollar means import costs go up.
Right.
I mean, think about something like gas, right?
Yeah.
The price of that is tied to global oil prices,
Okay.
and those are set in dollars.
Right.
But if oil starts being traded in this new BRICS currency, that changes everything,
Okay, so my road trip just got way more expensive.
possibly. And it's not just gas, right?
Right.
We import tons of stuff,
Electronics, yeah. Clothing.
everything. A weaker dollar could mean that new phone you want costs more,
Yeah.
or that imported fabric for your clothes that drives up prices.
Okay, so that's the inflationary pressure.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
And then, like, the classic response to inflation is for the Fed to raise interest rates.
Right, that's usually what happens, yeah.
But that has a ripple effect, too.
Totally. Higher interest rates mean borrowing money gets more expensive
Yeah.
for a house, a car, starting a business,
Right.
everything.
Oh, wow. So this BRICS currency is, like, setting off a whole chain reaction.
It's like dominoes, right?
Yeah.
You tip one over,
Yeah.
and suddenly everything's affected.
From daily expenses
Yep.
to the housing market.
It's all connected.
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot to digest, just thinking about the U.S.
It's a lot.
But what about the rest of the world? Is
No.
this good news for them, bad news, or just weird news?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of countries, this could be a good thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, think about it. This could signal a move towards a multipolar financial world.
So less U.S. and Europe calling all the shots.
Yeah, potentially.
Wow.
Emerging markets,
Yeah.
places in Africa, Latin America, parts of Asia,
Yeah.
they might see this BRICS bloc as like a more level playing field.
So one that doesn't automatically favor Western interests?
Exactly. They might start trading more with BRICS nations
Okay.
using their currency, and that changes everything.
So the whole balance of global trade could shift.
Potentially.
And that could even, like, put pressure on traditional U.S. alliances.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, countries might rethink their strategies.
Totally. Like, who are their real partners? Where do their interests lie?
Okay, so this BRICS currency isn't just about money.
Nope.
It's about power,
The
alliances,
whole future.
the whole future of how we do business globally.
It really is.
It's kind of mind-blowing, honestly.
It's a huge development.
Yeah, and it's a lot to think about.
It is.
So we're going to take a quick pause here.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the potential consequences of this BRICS currency.
Sounds good.
All right, so we've got a lot to unpack here. We were talking about how the U.S. needs to think strategically about, like, how to respond to this whole thing.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
So before the break, you mentioned, a digital dollar,
Yeah.
strengthening alliances,
Yeah.
boosting domestic production.
Right.
Those are all big pieces.
Huge pieces.
But what else is on the table?
Well, there's another piece that we haven't really talked about yet.
All right.
That's diplomacy.
Oh, interesting. So you mean, like, actually talking to the BRICS nations, not just viewing them as competition?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to fall into that trap, right?
Yeah.
Of seeing this as like us versus them.
Right, right.
But engaging in open dialogue with these countries,
Yeah.
it's essential, like understanding what their motivations are,
Mhm.
what their concerns are.
Because that could help us figure out how to navigate this whole thing.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
so talking instead of just, like, digging in our heels.
Right. It's about finding common ground,
Yeah.
maybe even areas where we can collaborate.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's be real here. The U.S. has been, like, top dog for a long time.
Yeah, we've been at the top of the pyramid.
Is it really prepared to share the stage?
That's a great question, and I think that's really what's at the heart of this. Like,
Yeah.
is the U.S. willing to accept a world that's more multipolar.
A world where economic power isn't so concentrated in the West?
Exactly. Because if we cling too tightly to these existing power structures,
Okay.
it could create a lot of friction, a lot of instability.
So it's almost like a philosophical shift,
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
as much as like an economic one,
Right.
like a change in mindset about how the world actually works.
Totally. It's about adaptability,
Yeah.
being willing to embrace change. You know, think about it like this. For decades, the U.S. has been like the conductor of the global economic orchestra.
Okay.
But now there's this new group of musicians,
Well, I like that analogy.
and they want to play a different tune.
And if we refuse to share the instruments
Right. Exactly.
or even acknowledge their music, the whole thing falls apart.
The symphony's over.
Yeah.
The question is, can we find a way to harmonize?
Yeah.
Can we create something new and exciting together?
Okay, I'm really starting to see how this BRICS currency is about so much more than just like a different kind of money.
It really is.
It's forcing us to rethink the whole structure
Yeah, the whole system.
of the global economy.
It's a potential paradigm shift.
Yeah, and like any major transition, there are going to be challenges.
Right, totally.
Yeah. I mean, we keep hearing about this 2025 launch date,
Yeah.
but to be honest, it still feels like a bit of a long shot.
I mean, even if they have the political will,
Yeah.
even if they have the economic alignment,
Yeah.
creating a new global currency is a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
There are going to be technical complexities, things they haven't even thought of yet.
Right. They can't just flip a switch and everyone's using BRICS bucks.
Exactly. And we haven't even talked about the technical side of things.
Oh, wow.
Like designing a secure digital currency,
Yeah.
that's stable. That's widely accepted. That's super user-friendly.
That's a huge task.
It is. It's a monumental task.
Right, because if this thing's going to compete with the dollar,
Yeah,
it has to be rock solid.
it does. It needs to be super transparent, too.
Like, people need to trust it.
Right.
Yeah.
It needs to be secure from
Yeah.
cyber attacks, from fraud.
Okay, so even if they do launch this thing in 2025,
Yeah.
it's not like the dollar just disappears overnight.
No, it'll be a process.
More of a gradual thing.
Yeah, I think it's more like a slow erosion if the BRICS currency gains traction.
Okay.
It's a competition, right?
Uh-huh.
For market share, for trust, for perceived stability.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a long game.
With really high stakes.
Incredibly high stakes. I mean, the outcome of this could reshape the global balance of power.
Yeah.
It could change the entire world economy.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
It is.
Okay, so you've laid out the challenges.
Yeah.
The potential risks.
A lot of risks.
But what does it all mean for me, like personally?
Right.
Should I be like running for the hills, stocking up on gold?
I don't think you need to panic just yet.
Okay, good.
But I do think it's wise to be informed and prepared.
Okay, but prepared for what exactly?
Be prepared for a world where the U.S. dollar might not be the only game in town.
Okay.
Where the global economy is more, multipolar.
Yeah.
Where power is more distributed.
So basically a shift away from that like U.S.-centric system we've getting used to.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
And that could lead to some instability, right?
Yeah, in the short term, as markets and investors adjust, there could definitely be some bumps in the road.
So what should we be watching out for?
Well, we already talked about inflation, right?
Yeah.
As the dollar weakens, imported goods get more expensive.
Yeah.
But there could also be fluctuations in investment markets.
Oh, okay.
Like if confidence in the dollar starts to erode,
Yeah.
investors might start moving their money to other assets.
Okay, so some ups and downs in my retirement portfolio?
Potentially, yeah. Which is why it's so important to have a diversified portfolio.
Right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Right.
And talk to a financial advisor if you're feeling uncertain.
So don't panic, but be proactive.
Yeah.
And stay informed.
I think that's a good approach.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
But it's also important to remember that, change can be a good thing.
Oh.
It can be a catalyst for innovation, for progress.
So this isn't just about like worst case scenarios.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, this is also an opportunity for the U.S., right?
Yeah.
To rethink our economic policies,
Yeah.
to strengthen our partnerships,
Yeah.
to invest in a more sustainable future.
Okay, so maybe instead of fearing this BRICS currency,
Right.
we can see it as like a wake-up call.
I love that. It's a chance to reevaluate our priorities,
Yeah.
our values, our role in the world.
Okay, that's a much more empowering way to think about it.
It is. The future isn't just something that happens to us, right?
Yeah.
It's something we create.
Through the choices we make.
Exactly.
I like that. So what choices should our listener be thinking about right now?
That's a good question.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. Like, we've talked about the potential impacts of this BRICS currency on the U.S., globally, all of it. Trade, the dollar, alliances. It feels like everything's on the table.
It really does, yeah.
But for our listeners, like, what's the takeaway here? What's the big picture?
I think the core takeaway is that we're at a turning point.
Okay.
The world is changing. The global economic landscape is shifting.
Yeah.
And those old rules, like, they might not apply anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this isn't just about a new kind of money, right?
Right.
It's about the world becoming more multipolar.
Okay, so more multipolar, does that basically mean, like, less reliance on the U.S. and its allies?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
Okay.
I mean, for decades, the U.S. has had this really unique position
Uh-huh.
in the global financial system, right?
Yeah.
But now we're seeing these other power centers emerging,
Right.
and they have different ideas
Okay.
about how things should work. The BRICS nations are a perfect example of that.
So you're saying, like, the U.S. might not be the only one calling the shots anymore.
I think that's a real possibility.
Okay, so a world where power is more distributed,
Yeah,
less concentrated in the West?
potentially, yeah.
I mean, that sounds like it could be a good thing, right?
You did.
Like giving more countries a voice.
Right, like a more balanced system.
Yeah.
One that's less reliant on a single currency, a single way of doing things.
So maybe a little less U.S.-centric.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, any big shift like this,
Yeah.
there are going to be challenges.
We've talked about those challenges, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, inflation, market volatility, political tensions, it's a lot.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
It can. So I think the question for your listeners is like,
Yeah.
how do they fit into all of this?
Yeah, what can they actually do?
Right. Well, I think step one is education.
Okay,
Like, don't just read the headlines. You know,
right.
dig deeper.
Yeah.
Read about the BRICS nations.
Okay.
Understand their economies, their goals.
So do your homework, basically.
Yeah, because knowledge is power,
Yeah.
right?
Especially now.
Exactly.
What
Oh,
else?
well, think about your personal finances, too.
Right.
Like, are you diversified?
Yeah,
Do you have a plan for if the markets get crazy?
right.
A financial advisor can be really helpful for that kind of thing.
Okay, because this isn't just some abstract thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, this could actually affect people's lives.
It could. Their savings, their investments, their daily expenses, everything.
Wow. Okay.
So it's about connecting those global trends
Yeah.
to individual action,
Right. Right.
being informed, making smart choices.
So knowledge is power. Diversification is key.
I see.
Anything else our listeners should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that we don't have to go through this alone.
Oh, okay.
Like, talk to people,
Yeah.
get different perspectives, challenge your own assumptions.
Yeah. Get out of those echo chambers.
Exactly. The more we talk to each other, the more we understand.
Yeah, the better we can handle all of this.
Right. Because this BRICS currency, whether it launches in 2025 or not,
Right.
it's a sign of things to come.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the world is changing.
And we've got to adapt.
We do. We have to adapt.
Okay, that's a good note to end on, I think.
Yeah,
Embrace change, be proactive, and keep learning.
I love it.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the BRICS currency.
It's been a pleasure.
We've covered a lot, but this is really just the beginning of the conversation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So keep exploring these topics, stay curious about the world,
Absolutely.
and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.